Catherine, is John coming back?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry? What? We start at 6. Yeah, there's 4 for a quorum. I'm irritated. Why did John just leave the room? No, I'm just going to get started. Well, no, Evan's not here. I'm not going to wait for John. He just left. I'm just going to get started. Okay, I would like to call to order the January 9th, 2024 Auburn Maine Planning Board meeting. And the first agenda item on the agenda is roll call, and I will start with my left.
Riley Bergeron.
Darren Finnegan.
Dave Trask.
Stacy LeBlanc.
Evan Sear.
Tim DeRoche.
Excellent. So we have 2 members who are absent. So Paul Jakes, he is a full member, he is absent. And then we have Amanda, she's an associate member and she's absent. So I will be elevating Tim to the full membership. I think as people also know too, there were 3 applications for 2023. Tony Ferraro, she decided not to reapply for that application. We did have members of the board apply for, and they were approved for the 1/1/2024 planning board session. As we know, the new mayor and the council, they rescinded that order. We did check with legal. That is something that they can do. I want to advise everyone here that Evan and Tim, they still have voting powers and they still have the ability to debate and have conversation. Alrighty, so the next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes, and I will seek a motion to approve or amend those.
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor? Okay, excellent. I was in there, so I won't vote. Perfect. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is public hearing site plan review for the PAL Center.
Thank you. I'm just going to load that up. Okay, so what we're lucky today because we do have the applicants and the designers of the PAL Center here to answer any remaining questions. So what I'm going to do is just review the PAL Center from the ordinance perspective, what we'll be looking at from the planning board and as staff while reviewing this. So what this project is we are going to be, the proposal is to replace the existing PAL Center with a 14,651 square foot single story building with a basketball court, teen rooms, a multi-purpose meeting and storage rooms, bathrooms and showers, a commercial kitchen, and it will also include utility improvements, transportation improvements, including pedestrian improvements, and there will be room in the future for a playground and a community garden. This parcel falls within the, it falls in 2 zones. It's within the conservation open space zone and a little bit within T42. It is slightly within the T42 zone because while the roads were discontinued, which were zoned in part T42, those conveyances became part of the PAL Center area where they'll be conducting their project, part of the conveyances that they'll be using. The planning board has a few ways that you can review and approve the PAL Center. It is a bit of a unique situation because it is in a zone, the conservation open space zone, that doesn't have any stated permitted uses. It doesn't have any stated special exception uses. It also doesn't have any stated prohibited uses. What it does have is a short outline of what the conservation open space district is. And because of that, we decided to review it under the T-4.2 ordinance because it's the adjacent one for the surrounding neighborhood, and it's the one that gives us guidance for looking at things like setbacks and what are similar uses. Also, a few years ago, we were discussing, or the city was discussing, allowing municipal uses in all zones. We had also discussed this for conservation open space. The brakes were put on really adding anything to conservation open space at that point because there were some disagreements, including, for example, whether timber harvesting would be allowed. So that's something that the city should look at doing in the future is to include some different uses there. But we do believe that because it is a recreational use that's open for the public, and also it follows a precedent of other conservation open space uses like the senior center being allowed in that park area. We believe that this is, and it's a continuation of something that's existing. We believe that this is an appropriate use for the space. The applicant has, to the best of the site conditions, met all of the requirements. In the staff report, we have laid out how the project meets the requirements in form-based code. Like I said, it is replacing the existing PAL Center. It's a much-needed improvement for the area. With it, there will be traffic improvements. So part of those improvements include closing Chestnut Street, which we already voted on, so that's not what we'll be discussing today. But it does create one-way circulation on the road, which we believe will both reduce and slow down traffic. It will be narrower lanes within on those roads themselves and going into the PAL Center. They have added appropriate signage and striping to direct traffic and control it. They have a full-size gym in this court with possibilities for badminton, basketball, tennis, and probably something else that I'm not thinking of. And this is a really exciting project for the City of Auburn. It's one that we think will be really excellent for the downtown. We think it's a really beautiful, attractive building. Over time, so it was initially proposed as a 2-story building, and then after COVID, the cost of doing that building rose up significantly to the point where the city decided to work with what we had, and this is a really good design, and we think it was a proactive move to make this building single story after those changing conditions, as we expect to always happen in projects like this. Let's see. So daily trips, that it will generate 422 daily trips. Here is we have a quick layout of the traffic study, and the applicant did request a few waivers. That had to do with how closely the project met the requirements of T-4.2. First of all, they requested a waiver for the building width. On one side of the building, if you're facing the building from the parking lot, it does exceed the building width, and it is because of the site constraints of being between 2 roads and also having to fit within existing utilities and the full-size court. However, if you stand on the access way, the sidewalk, then it does meet the building width requirements. So there are 2 ways to look at that and review it there. I have viewed this as having 2 frontages, one on this sidewalk area because it does appear as a main entrance, and also by this parking area to the south of the building. They've also requested a waiver on the front wall frontage for sod length. This is one of those design standards that's unique to form-based code that says that blank lengths of wall that are 10 feet or over are prohibited. this doesn't work well with a large gym, as you can imagine. We need to there's a really standard design for gyms, so that's the reason why they've requested that extension or that waiver. It just wasn't quite conducive to the design of the project. Next is a similar request, and it's the ground story building frontage facade shall comprise a minimum of 40%, a maximum of 90% of ground story frontage, or of the windows should be window coverage. For a similar reason, this is all gym, and you can imagine if a lot of that is windows, we might run the risk of, first of all, high heating and cooling costs, also possible damage. So this was overall a better design, and we believe that the planning board should accept these waiver requests. And we do have the applicant here if they want to add any more information. Okay.
I'd like to add just a couple of things. I was part of the process that discontinued the Chestnut Street, and I think that what we heard a lot from the public, and I want to make sure that we address this, is the access management standards, essentially the traffic. And we did do an independent traffic study based on the public hearing and the public input that we had. We asked our consultant, would it incur to hire a traffic engineer that really specializes in traffic and traffic engineering. So they looked at things like, they did traffic counts in the area. They looked at the use under the ITE manual, which is basically the standard for traffic studies. And they looked at, Catherine touched a little bit on it, on the daily use, the 400 trips. But what really strikes a higher level of, requirement or ordinance information is when you hit 100 trips in an hour. So the peak hour trips, I usually refer to oftentimes is in the evening between 4 and say 6 p.m. is those peak hour trips, 100 trips. We did not hit that. This project does not require a traffic movement permit, but we still went through the process of addressing the access management standards. And a couple of things, Catherine, if you could look at the access management slide, just to kind of really touch on it a little bit. A couple of mitigation factors that we came up with, the traffic engineer, the city engineer, myself, and the consultants that are here, and they could speak more at length, but I just wanted to point some of it out, is the angled parking. That angled parking really ensures that one way, if you go back to the site plan, that angled parking that you're showing, that we're showing there, originally we had it straight back, and that really gave the public the impression that they could go either direction. So the two-way traffic is for only local traffic only. So as soon as you go into this parking lot, you're committed to a one-way traffic. So I think that's important. That was a mitigation feature that we designed into that. Secondly, you'll notice some additional painted lines on those interior turn radiuses. Because it's one lane, we want to make sure that the traffic is pushed to that one side. So again, respecting the neighbors and making sure that there's no interception between the neighbors. We had them push that line and push that travel lane to the outside, and we did that with paint. So that's just really a couple of quick things. Obviously, the signage was really important on the site. The do not enter, the no parking signs, those types of things. So I just wanted to touch base on that. And in addition to that, the city understands that there may be a lot of use, and there's already a lot of use there. There's lacrosse that happens there, soccer. My son played travel soccer. I've been to something on this field where there was many parents there. But knowing that the use is high and it's a great spot, they've got other uses there. We are working on additional parking at 7 Chestnut. That's a process that's going to happen, but the city does understand that for the ultimate experience and really addressing everything with the abutters for traffic, having another parking lot and having additional outlets at this location is really going to alleviate that. One other item that I'd like to talk about in the last slide is the photometric plan. There was a lot of comments about lighting on the site and how is that going to affect the butters. This may not have been clear for the planning board, but it really shows that the site is lighting up where they need to light up. I.e. the walking areas, the existing parking lots. But because of the types that they use, the types of lighting that they use, it's really lighting that points down and really protects from shedding light into abutting areas. You can see in their study that none of the light that they're proposing is going to be affecting any of the abutters. And I think that they did a really good job of showing that, and they were really conscious about fulfilling and I guess we really got to go back to the original approval process and the 4 criteria that we look for site plan review. I think that's where the planning board should be most critical as they review this, because we could have went, as Catherine may have alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, we could have went with just a non-conforming lot, and that would have just struck us right into this site plan review piece where it would have been a lot more streamlined. Going through this process for the form-based code, I think is a lot more stringent. And it really takes the time to answer a lot of the questions about what the facility is going to look like and how it's going to act. And then I just want to add one more piece. It's important on the waiver. And that, we have a couple of things, and I'd like to have the architect talk about this a little bit, but we have a couple of things going against one another in terms of the actual, all the natural lighting that's occurring, or we're requesting it under the form-based code, where we have to have a certain amount of windows. Because it's a gym and the R rating and what it takes to heat that, the number of BTUs, and the energy, under the energy code, they really tried to minimize some of that window stuff in certain areas where it made sense, depending on the direction of the lighting, if it's south facing, if it's not south facing. So I think that energy really is a criteria, and in terms of long-term use and the Pal Center and how it's going to really make a difference for this community, I think energy is a big thing, because this helps maintain the structure. Not only that, we're not spending money on fuel we don't need. We're not letting emissions into the environment, but it gives more money so we can maintain for programs. And I think that that's, from a big holistic picture, I think that that's a big reason why, if we would consider this waiver, that might be a reason why for energy.
Okay, any questions for staff?
Staff has mentioned that this is partially in T42, which is why you are requesting that we review it under T42. Please maybe forgive me my ignorance on this, but I understand that when the road was discontinued, necessarily the zoning would overlap that land in certain areas. It's no longer a road, but it appears that it's all conservation, open space, and so I've yet to see a map where that is overlaid on the actual parcel to help me understand why this is even a possibility right now. And I just think that I've seen projects that fall within 2 zones utilize a zone. I can say in the past when we've done that, it's been whatever the majority zone is. I can think of one instance in which there were two zones and we used the more restrictive of the two because it was sort of an even split. But I'm not seeing any, let alone any substantial coverage in the T42. So I need help understanding that before we move forward at all.
Yeah, and so I think that for the most part, you're about 95% correct on that. I'd still give you an A, but the entranceways on both roads, Walnut Street and Chestnut Street, where those turning radiuses, specifically where we talk about those improvements that this project is doing based on the traffic that's shown on the site plan, that's actually in the form-based code. But the remainder of the project is correct, that it's in the conservation open space piece.
So I almost feel like I want to raise my hand, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, the current PAL Center, where is it located? In what zone?
It's in conservation open space.
Okay. Any part of that current PAL Center, is it a part of the new T 4.2? Any part of the current PAL Center?
No.
No, okay. So the current PAL Center, as it stands now, is in conservation open space, right?
Correct.
And what we're doing now is not only keeping it there, right, but we're expanding it into an adjacent zone, which is the T 4.2, correct?
That's
Yeah, and
correct.
I think okay, and then I heard you say you're leveraging that T 4.2 because it is adjacent to where the PAL Center is already, right?
Right, and we look at things like, trying to, create some consistency and conformity with the neighborhood. We were trying to use those metrics to measure up against. So in my opinion, it's a more restrictive approach, whereas we could have just deferred to the non-conforming lot piece and the replacement of structures, and then go on just to the four pieces of the criteria under site plan review.
It appears that the only parts of the new PAL Center that would be in the T42 are part of the entry and exit?
That's correct.
Yep.
Do you want us to move it? The building?
I actually really like this project. I know that there are people in the neighborhood that are not particularly happy to see this happening. I think this has been a long time coming. I think the project itself is a great one. Everyone on this board knows that I'm going to be a stickler for our policy, and I'm going to be the stickler and ask, why is it that we're allowed to do that? I can draw only on my 11 years of experience and what's written in state statute and ordinance. In my experience, we've never done this. It's always been the building itself, because the building is what we were applying the standards to, and that's why we would utilize that zone. And I may be ignorant here, but I actually don't recall anything that would allow us to utilize a separate zone if the building itself isn't partially in that zone. So I don't want this to appear like I'm trying to deep six this. I want to make sure that if this happens, that it's done correctly and everyone walks away and understands why it was done that way. And even if they disagree with it, they can recognize why it was done that way and that, yep, the way it was done was above board. To me, it's important. It's an important project, and I don't want things hanging over its head.
Yeah, and I think that, we can point to a precedence that was set in the city, and I'll specifically go down through some of the structures that are currently in the conservation open space. Ingersoll Turf Facility was built in 1996. That's 26,400 square feet in the COS. The Hasty Community Center, that's been there a long time prior to any ordinance is, but 1950, that's 20,800 square feet. Here's an interesting one. Senior Community Center, built in 2021, 7,200 square feet.
And those are all in the conservation open space, right?
That's correct.
But this, if I understand you correctly, you're wondering why we're using the T4.2B.
Yeah,
to-
and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
kind of like parlay
But so,
upon this.
hold on, let me kind of finish this one up. You said that John, that it's more stringent, so it might check more boxes for the public. And Evan, you said you've used a more stringent standard, but that was when there was almost 50% of the land being that other zone. So is there merit to using the more stringent standards in this just because the open space would be an easier review?
That's an excellent question. By utilizing the more stringent standard, we're required to make a determination on 4 different waivers. Two of them being the width of a building and coverage of glass. And so I'm thinking forward, as the board does these things, that what we are doing now doesn't necessarily have to be repeated in the future, but it certainly would create a situation in which someone might ask, well, why did this not get approved based on that standard and not waived? Because I felt that this was equally as important a project. I guess I am concerned because it still requires 4 waivers, and they're not small waivers about like the width of the curb cut and something like that.
So, John, can I ask you a quick question? So you just gave us 4 examples. And I think where Evan is going, and I don't want to speak to him, but I'll speak for myself, is the planning board, as we know, has been under extreme scrutiny. So to that end, I think Evan is trying to, as he said, be as, policy positive as he can be. So do you know of those 4 other projects? Was there any backlash? Was there any further scrutiny? Like, was there any feedback? Like,
Unfortunately, I wasn't here. I don't know if there was any kind of scrutiny or pushback.
are you getting any scrutiny today on those further projects? Those current buildings in the conservation open
No, I
space?
think it's.
Does the public come to you? Do they come, public comment?
No, I don't think so. I think they're well-received public buildings that provide a great benefit to the community. I think particularly the senior community center, I think it's been a great addition to the community. The conservation open space, this is a recreation benefit, and it does support the conservation open space. I think for me, from not necessarily an ordinance, but a kind of organizational standpoint, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, a lot of this land is under the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We went through a lot of pain and anger to not put the building in the Land and Water Conservation Fund. This is land that is outside of what's the park proper, and it's really just owned by the city as land that's been utilized as this community center for the, like you said, since 2012. So we're going on, over 10 years that this site has been utilized for this use. We're not changing the use. We're increasing the footprint, but we're not changing the use. So, we took a hard look at this. There's a few ways we could approve this project and review this project, and we thought that this was the most likely way to do it that really addresses any of the public's concerns. So that's where staff stands on that.
Evan, actually, I think even 3 of the 4 waivers are related to restrictions from the T42B zone. And the only one being the off-street parking that would actually be located in that zone. So do you think that granting that 4th waiver but not the first 3 Because if you look at all the department reviews, the only comment was about the parking. There wasn't any, the other waivers didn't seem like they were asked for by any of the other departments. Do you think we could pass it by only giving the fourth waiver, or do we have to give all four waivers?
I think we could pass it. I think we would dramatically change the project itself, and I think that would change the site plan enough that we would end up back here, because the building would have to change enough that it would warrant another planning board review. So again, it just brings me to this piece where I'm saying I absolutely appreciate that staff wish to utilize standards, because there are no standards in conservation open space. I worry because we're saying, well, we're going to apply these standards, but by the way, we actually need 4 waivers from these standards, and the 4 waivers aren't particularly small waivers. And with regard to meeting the neighborhood's concerns, I don't think the concerns would have been different had this been reviewed under conservation open space than they will be under T42. But it does now raise additional concerns as to why we would waive things. It's just not, to me, it muddies a project that ought to be, if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But it ought not to have procedural questions involved. It ought not to have questions like this involved, I guess. But I guess I'm also frustrated that so let's be honest, right? The applicant is the city, okay? So it's sort of frustrating that the city brought it all this far without having said, hey, planning board, it needs to be on your radar, because it's possible that the planning board could have developed a solution to this issue already, and that there could be standards applied that wouldn't create these issues. And so it's frustrating to me, and like I said, I've already outed it. I like the project. It's just important to me that if this goes through, that it goes through in such a way that, everyone doesn't have to be happy with it, but everyone can look at it, and it can be transparent and say, everyone can look at it and say, transparently, it makes sense that got approved, even though I don't like it. My fear being that right now it's just going to look like the government is granting the government waivers on these things in T42 that especially in a form-based code zone where we've spent a lot of time discussing these things to make sure that we're adhering to these standards with other developments.
So the planning board could review this project under the non-conformance standard and go back to just reviewing the site plan. I mean, that is an option that the planning board could have, and that's another way to procedurally approve this project.
So I just want to make sure that I understand this. So there is a path through the conservation zone without bringing in the small driveway area that's T42B, and now without having to do 4 exceptions because of the T42B, but it would.
Yeah. So we opted to review this project as staff under T42 because it was in the adjacent zone and it has stringent standards to review. And
More
as it is a
stringent
city, what?
More stringent.
Yeah, yes, more
okay.
stringent
Okay.
standards. And as a city project, especially, we opted to do the more stringent standards. However, a third mechanism to review this project would be covered in section 60-79, subsection 5 of the Code of Ordinances, which says the use of any property or building that formerly was used in a lawfully nonconforming manner and which was abandoned, as defined in section 60-81, may be permitted after approval by the planning board in accordance with Division 2 of Article 16 of this chapter, which is just site plan review. So really, the board does have the chance, if this is considered abandoned, which I think it probably could be if it's given a year of not being used, that is a way to approve that as well, and we wouldn't need to meet the standards. It could continue as a non-conforming use with the planning board's approval.
Catherine just brought up a point that I was going to bring up from last month's meeting. We had this discussion about an applicant with an abandoned building, which reminded me of this that we have. But also, I understand what Evan's saying about being very careful to not set a precedent, and I totally understand that and totally respect that. On the other end of that discussion, John brought up a number of municipal buildings that serve the public that set a precedent at the other end of the spectrum. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, right now, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think they set the precedent of doing this in conservation open space rather than utilizing T42, because while we've heard examples of municipal buildings being constructed, enlarged, improved in the conservation open space zone since its inception, again, I can think of no time when we utilized a small portion of where there would be some paving to create standards for a building that's not in that zone. And so I'm not trying to be obstinate. I just don't like it. So we've worked together long enough to know that there's going to have to be like a real...
All right, fair enough. Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to ask the applicant to come up if they would like and have and present your side. And then we will obviously go to public comment. We can bring it back for review and discussion and debate at that point in time, because we're kind of getting into the debate discussion. So would the applicant like to come forward? If not, it's totally fine. You don't have to.
Usually you just press thing. It is like if you have anything to add.
Hi. My name is Caitlin Glass. I'm with Woodard & Curran. We're the civil engineer for the project. And I don't know that I have much to add. I think, Catherine, you did a really nice job summarizing everything. And John, thank you for walking through all the access management standards. I guess I would just add that if there are any questions, I'm here as the civil engineer. We also have the architect here, and the traffic engineer is also in the room.
Perfect.
So.
Great. Awesome.
Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, at this point in time, I will seek a motion to open up public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Okay, so public comment. Come forward, state your name. You have 5 minutes. And, all right. And your address too, I'm so sorry.
My name's Maureen O'Brien. I'm at 42 Winter Street. I'm in a butter of the field. The PAL Center originally, I've lived there 40 years. Originally, it was the Early Learning Center. It was developmental preschool run by Pathways. And I did early intervention for the state for a while, and I did see kids at that program. The building is pretty much the same. I am very much in favor of doing programming for Auburn kids, but I am not in favor of closing Chestnut Street and building a super large building when we do have plenty of room down at Pettingill to do other buildings. Any of the buildings down there could be enlarged to incorporate kids. You wouldn't have to deal with traffic. They would be down in an area that would have plenty of space for the kids. The buildings could be done down there, and we don't need to spend $9 million on a new building in Auburn. It just duplicates what we already have. We already have an indoor basketball court down at Pettingill. We have at the PAL Center, we already have an industrial commercial kitchen that the city spent thousands and thousands of dollars to build. We could still use that building if they need it. We have an unused building right next to the pond that could be redone if they need space to do any sort of programming. It's never been used. The city spent a lot of money to build that building. and again, it's just not being used. You know, talking about this other space that, you know, the zoning issue, this should have been brought up a long time ago. The city doesn't even have the consideration to talk to people who live in this community, in this neighborhood, and I feel like we're being taken advantage of because a large portion of the people that live in the neighborhood now are renters, so they have the ability to abuse us this way and destroy our neighborhood. We want a safe neighborhood, and the city has not even maintained the pink rubber pads that they put on the streets when they redid them. And I just don't have confidence that the city is going to maintain these facilities in the way they need to be done. Obviously, they got these plans to do the buildings originally, and they were glass-walled buildings. It was just unbelievable that in our neighborhood they would initially do glass-walled buildings. It's been redone. I could not even access the plans for the building. The city has not been open in letting us get access to the plans until tonight. This is not the way to do business with the residents who live here. This isn't fair to us to have these meetings, and now you're going to make a decision. Give the neighborhoods time to have input. We live here. We've lived here for a long time. We'd like to have input. The city has made decisions to close the street without really, you know, including us in those decisions. We don't want the street closed. We don't need the street closed. You can have all the programming you need down at Pettingill Park. There's plenty of space, and you can use the buildings down there to either enlarge or change or whatever you need to do. And I think that there really needs to be more time for the neighborhood to be involved. Thank you.
Test. Joe Maley, 82 Webster Street in Auburn. I echo a lot of what Evan said. I do agree. Having a PAL center would be great. However, listening to some of what this gentleman said tonight, I think this planning board has been misled. On the traffic study, I live right at 82 Webster. I'm less than 300 feet away from the intersection of Webster and Chestnut. I don't know how they did the traffic study, but usually they use the cords that go across the road. I've never seen those. What they do, put people at the intersection for 1 hour and count cars? I don't know. So it puts in doubt on the efforts that were really made into a traffic study. The second thing that he said was, he mentioned that a lot of kids go down there and play. I would like to see some videos of that. I haven't seen a bunch of kids down there in a long time. They've got a fenced-in area with all kinds of kiddie toys and stuff. It's always locked up. The kids are never there. So you can take that for what it's worth. I don't think the numbers are there to justify this entire project. Something that I heard a lot tonight, open space. Can somebody explain to me how putting a 14,000 square foot building in a space equals open space? I mean, that's a serious building, and you're putting it right in the middle of what you're calling open space. That defies any sense of logic. This is the rough part, and I want to be careful. Some of this planning, as far as I know, and I might be mistaken, some of this planning took place under the previous administration. things were done, maybe not on the up and up, I don't know, I'm not making accusations, but I do think that considering the former police chief and present manager's position, he has an interest in building something. Whether it be a legacy for himself, that he did something great for the city of Auburn, I don't know. But between him, his personality.
Yeah, we just want to stick to this project.
Excuse me?
Stick to the project, please.
Okay, so anyway, I think you guys got sold a bill of goods that really don't exist, even though I don't understand TB3 versus pick a number. I don't know the zonings, but anyway, that's all I have. Too many questions. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. At one of the prior meetings, when this project was first before the board, the principal subject was the closure of Chestnut Street, as you will recall. I spoke at that time expressing concern about the effect not on the total volume of traffic that was coming or would be coming into the area, but upon the response time for public safety vehicles. Because by closing Chestnut Street, it makes it very much more time-consuming to reach the lower end of Winter Street, Summer Street, and those short cross streets, Burn Street, Parker Street, Taylor, Ash, those other streets in that neighborhood. The only ways into that neighborhood now would be through what Mr. Cousins described as the busiest traffic intersection in the state of Maine at Union Street Bypass, Turner Street, Center Street, or going all the way up Hampshire Street to its very end, to the beginning of Gamage Avenue, across Denison, and then down Summer. I am a layman and don't have any scientific data, but I would make an estimate that that might add 5 minutes to response time. When I brought those points up previously, Mr. Blay assured us that a traffic impact study would be done, and I've heard some statistics tonight about total volume of traffic, but I haven't heard any information about traffic impact time, and look forward to receiving that if it's available.
Okay, anyone else like to come?
My name's Brian Gallagher. I live at 42 Winter Street. Could you put up quickly the map that you had up before that showed it was mostly green and you had a straight line that went down through it?
Is it
Yeah, that straight line, the upper corner of that straight line, that is our garage right there.
here?
Currently, we have 30, it's an old house. We have 32 windows. I think we can see the current PAL Center from 7 of them. So it's already in our viewpoint. But, in the past, I think I did see a couple of lacrosse practices out there, nothing regular. We used to have a flag football league that used that field. The town manager said that area is the gem of Auburn. And so we're going to stick a big building in the middle. Back when you first tried to close Chestnut Street, my wife did a canvass of the neighborhood, and she visited 50 houses, and she found one where they thought that was a good idea, or they didn't care. Most of the neighborhood didn't want Chestnut Street closed. We've been trying to get copies of this for a while. This morning, my wife, sorry, Maureen, my wife got an email from the city manager's administrative assistant saying that in order to get this, that was going to be a FOIA request. And it was going to be, and it would cost $25 an hour. The first 2 hours would be free. And she was wanting this, but she said, well, why don't you can you give us a copy of what was handed out in a meeting 2 years ago at the facility? And no one can find that. So, you talk about transparency, you talk about community input, you talk about, it hasn't existed. It hasn't existed. And I don't know if this is a good idea or bad idea, but it's gonna be a view from my window pretty easily. In terms of the light study, there were improvements done to the basketball courts down below us a few years ago, new lighting. The new lighting, when it's turned on, is up on a corner of our house. I mean, it may be lighting that's supposedly aimed down, but you can see it on our house, and the light pollution in our neighborhood is really quite bad now. So if you want to talk to the community about doing something like this from the beginning and in depth, that might be a good idea. I have no idea. I have no idea how to do that at this point. So those are my points, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, anyone else like to come forward?
My name is Judy Russo-Gagnon, and I live at 9 Walnut Street, and we have owned our home since 1989. We don't agree with the traffic plan being on Walnut Street. It will affect us. The increase in traffic will make the street more dangerous than what it already is. The length of Walnut Street is approximately 202 feet long, and the width is 22 feet wide. The number of cars that currently speed on that short street is unbelievable. There are 10 children who live on the street. It's not uncommon for us to be outside with speeders and asking them to slow down. I even bought a caution sign to ask, hoping that people would slow down, caution children at play, and that is often ignored. There's a slight curve in the road from the center, from the Powell Center to Walnut Street, and it's just enough with the overgrown brush that there's a blind spot, so if cars are coming up from the Powell Center, they can't see around the corner. So that adds an added danger. If the Powell Center activity is on Chestnut Street, doesn't it make more sense to keep the traffic activity entrance and exit on Chestnut Street and Webster Streets? Once upon a time, Walnut Street was a dead end, so why couldn't we maybe just go back to that? If you include Walnut Street in your plan, then I respectfully say to you that if any of our children are injured or worse, then the blood would be on your hands. There's concern for those of us living on Walnut Street with the road being as wide as it is. How do you make a 2-lane street if that's what's going to happen? I'm not sure. And those on-road parking would make it difficult. Chestnut Street is already 2 lanes, which would be conducive for the traffic. With the increase in activity that is expected with this development, what is the plan for monitoring and supervising those utilizing the grounds? As it is now with some of the older kids, we see a lack of respect for themselves, others, and property. Trash is often littered everywhere. The trash cans are kicked over. On weekends, my 9-year-old granddaughter and I will go around the neighborhood to pick up bags of trash. I foresee there being more litter with the increased activity. I always thought it would be a great thing maybe if the kids using the Powell Center might help their little community and maybe take pride in their area. They may need to be taught to respect their community and to respect the earth. We have 5 security cameras installed outside of our home, which was advised by a police officer so that we could keep an eye on some of the undesirable activity. The cameras have caught kids coming up from the Powell Center, running through our yard, hiding for whatever reason, ringing the doorbell, running away. We had 3 days in a row where the kids were doing that. We saw them coming from the Powell Center, excuse me, so we assume it was from them. I'm certain that any one person would get tired pretty quickly of this behavior. I'm curious as to what would happen with 16 Walnut Street, which is now vacant property. When the bank owned the property, that area was well-kept, but now that the city owns it, it's been neglected. The cost of the proposed development is a concern, as others have said. I'm sure that the taxpayers would agree to the, would not agree to the cost of the project, especially in light of the millions of dollars that were spent over budget with the high school, with the facilities that already exist in the city. Does there need to be a duplication? We may not be a Nottingham Road neighborhood, but most of us take pride in the neighborhood and we want to feel good about where we live. And we're raising our children to do the same. At times it feels like we live in the hood.
Thank you so, your 5 minutes are up. Thank you so
Okay.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Anyone else like to come forward?
Hi, good evening. Phil Kroll, 610 Park Avenue, and as was mentioned, city manager. So I'd like to just speak regarding the community value to this project. As was said, even though the building was opened in 2012, it was in 2010 that driving through this neighborhood that I saw the vacant building. As was mentioned, was early child care center for Pathways that had been abandoned for quite some time, and the building was really ready for demo. I came before the city council and I asked for the building to be used for a PAL center. After quite a bit of community conversation regarding the need in this neighborhood, we met with the YMCA, we met with the Boys and Girls Club, we talked about potential use here. Based on those meetings, it was decided that maybe the best approach would be PAL Center, being helping supported through the police station. We were able to acquire the building through grant funding. We were able to, about $40,000, we were able to turn the building into an operational center. It's a drop-in center. If you drive through this neighborhood, there was a reason why we identified this neighborhood. Half square mile around this neighborhood drives close to a quarter of the police calls in the entire city are in this half square mile right around this center. About another just under 30% of the children who are victimized in our city live in this half square mile around this building. Having this presence was critical. If you drove through this neighborhood, and which I did, and looked down at the basketball courts that were down there, there were kids gathering, but there were no basketballs. There was no opportunity for activity. The PAL Center's been operational now for many years. There are sporting equipment that's available for the youth. We've had two great directors that have run the center over these last few years that have just done an outstanding job. We have a community garden there that has done tremendous outreach within the community for access for youth and planting. We had a partnership with University of Maine Cooperative Extension to make that possible through an unfortunate death of the individual that was helping run that program. Things have shifted a little bit with that project, but we're hoping to bring that back. It's important for this neighborhood. I think some of the speakers that spoke, these children that we're talking about serving are children in this neighborhood. This isn't, PAL Center doesn't bring many kids outside of a walking distance. This is a drop-in center. It's not a center where parents drive by and drop their kids off. The majority of them walk there after school or get off the bus there because they live in that neighborhood. Many of the kids, when we went through this, started looking at this project, these were children that were, you've heard of latchkey kids. These are locked out kids. They had nowhere to go after school until a parent came home from work. And so this program makes that opportunity for them to come in and receive services. Primarily, it's access to food. We have a tremendous food insecurity issue in this neighborhood with many of these children, and this gives them direct access to food. We also have partnered with Bates College and Central Maine Community College. As part of their programming, their staff come into the PAL Center and work in the program. There's homework help. There's a great deal of services that are provided here, not just inside the building, but outside as well. As I mentioned, it's a drop-in center. It's not one where kids come into the program, they have to stay there. They can come in, they can get some services, they could get a snack, they could get some homework help, and then they could leave and they could go back out into the neighborhood. That's why it's there. It's a safe place for children to be able to walk into that are in that neighborhood. We evaluated every piece of property that we had within the city when we talked about opening this center. We talked about expanding access in the Hasty building at Rec. We looked at that space. It was about accessibility. The moment that you have to transport children, the Rec Center minus will be up by the Walmart. To be able to access that just wasn't going to be something that was going to work. With Denison cutting through that Rec property, it made it nearly impossible for us to talk about how will we get kids down there to be able to utilize services. This was the best space. Through the city's studies regarding athletic space, especially gymnasium space, if you go back and look at that study, the study identified basketball court as one of the basketball court access, and the city was one of the most pressing issues within the city.
Thank you. Your 5
Am I
minutes
at 5
are up.
minutes?
Yeah, you are.
So that's why there's a gym here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else would like to come forward that has not already spoken? Okay, seeing none, I will seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Excellent. Okay, so I do see some familiar and unfamiliar faces here from a public comment perspective. So we did take notes. I think that's what you saw. The purpose at this point in time, if we have any questions, right? So I heard a lot of feedback. We took that feedback. I think we digested it all in our own individual times. If there's any questions that you feel like you identified that we can address with staff, we can open it up to address questions.
This was brought up by 2 individuals, and it had to do with traffic study, and I would like to seek clarification from staff. Based on what I'm seeing in the packet, and what I was able to read before the meeting when we received these packets, and based on what Mr. Blay said tonight, it's my understanding that a traffic impact study was not done because it was not triggered. However, the city asked their engineers working on this project to develop best management practices for traffic, despite there not being a need for them to do that because the traffic study didn't kick that in. That is to say, what I'm hearing, what I heard tonight, and what I was seeing in my packet is that a traffic study was not done, so there were certain traffic mitigations that would not have been required. The city chose to move ahead and address some of those concerns, even though there was no traffic study, because it was not triggered by the volume. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct. We had a traffic impact study looking at specifically, as we, even internally, we get pushback saying, well, we're not hitting the peak hour trip. There's still the access management section of the ordinance that we have to adhere to. And that doesn't necessarily mean if it's warranted by public concern, which we did get some public concern when we discontinued the road. And I was writing notes the whole time, and we went back to the consultant and specifically asked for that information. And those numbers on that 14,651 square foot building generated in the peak hour 28 trips. So that was the peak hour trip. So it did not generate an actual traffic movement permit, which the city does have delegated review. Our city engineer would review that information, just as they reviewed this information as well. I do want to, based off of that public comment in Mr. Beal, I owed him some information. I did query both the fire chief and the police chief on the response times, and then asked the traffic engineer to look at that as well. And they felt that based on accessibility from different avenues, different locations of responses from outlying it may be from the main response building, there may be times, but there's other, I'm trying to look for a word here, but there's other remote offices or places where they have a different station in different areas, so the response times are not affected by the closure of this road. So we do have that in writing, again, from the police chief and from the fire chief on that.
Okay, so just to reiterate what you said for the public, the response times are not impacted. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's correct.
Okay, and we know that because,
Well, we asked the fire and the police departments to take a
Okay.
look at that, and we
okay.
asked the.
And that's what they do for work, right? So they
That-
know this. Okay, just
That's
checking.
correct.
John, can you clarify, without the study, how do you determine the peak volume?
So there is an ITE manual, and that would be something that we would do with staff. So we have a staff review period with in-house that we would do. We actually have a traffic director right now. I would sit with him and we would crunch numbers, and we would sit with the city engineer and say, hey, do you agree with this based on the ITE manual, based on the size and the use? It's kind of like a lot of engineering is kind of like baking a cake. You follow the ingredients, and the ingredients is the square foot and the use in this particular case, and we generated a number. But understanding that there was going to be scrutiny from the public, we pushed ahead and had the study completed. So, and it's not John Blaze sitting up here saying, well, this is okay. This was a professional engineer with a specialty in traffic engineering, and I believe they're here today if you want to ask any specific questions about the study.
Thank you.
There was a question about monitoring and supervision plans for the property. Are there plans is there like night monitoring plans or property monitoring plans?
So that would be an operational question. There could be someone from the PAL Center here that may be able to answer that. I don't know how that works necessarily in response to our ordinance and how we can apply that through our ordinance. But that's certainly something that we could ask any of the PAL Center representatives on exactly how they're going to address that.
And I got one more question raised by the same person. What about the plans for 16 Walnut Street?
So, that is part of that parking plan layout and the future development of that site. We're looking at potentially developing that for which could be additional parking or additional ways to enhance the area for things that support the PAL Center. Those haven't been 100% thought out yet. There has to be some remediation and some things that we have to do in terms of due diligence, like a phase 1 environmental site assessment, and then potentially a phase 2, and then we've got to look at any hazardous materials. We just can't go in there and start demoing a structure and tearing it down and building something to enhance the site. So there's a process that we have to go through, and the acquiring of that is included in that process as well. So it does take some time.
Okay, so any other questions from the public that you guys would like to address? If not, I think we can go into dialogue discussion right now with staff. Or we can seek a motion.
In looking at the plans, I think that they have evolved as this project has moved forward, and quite frankly, there's no project that's going to there's no project that's going to meet everyone's expectation all the time. However, having seen lots of projects over the years and even municipal projects, I think city staff has done, I think, a more than reasonable job in trying to address as many of those concerns as they can while still being able to maintain the intent of the project. In that sense, I think this is a well put together site plan. I'm just going to go back. I don't understand why on earth we can review this pursuant to T42. As people have been talking, I've been trying to scour the ordinance, looking for authority to review, and all of the language is written with the assumption that whatever you are looking at is within the zone that is being applied to it. And so I am just having a hard time based on that. And as Stacy pointed out, we've been under incredible scrutiny. And I guess I'm just not. I understand why staff did this because it allowed for a higher level of scrutiny, but then also now requires additional waivers. I think if the waivers are not given, it ultimately completely changes the scope of the project to the point of needing an additional site plan and special exception review in the future because the changes would be so substantial. And I don't understand why this was done if I'm also hearing that there was a mechanism to be able to do this, to be able to demonstrate that some of this scrutiny was placed on the project, but then not require us to use a zone that the project isn't really in, and then ask for waivers. Like that, I'm still stuck on that. That has not been satisfied for me.
Okay, so I'm going to say two things. So one is just for everyone's collective recalibration. We are not a political body. We were not voted to be on this board. Our job is to have projects come to us and review them based upon zones and ordinance. So I just want to make that collectively clear for the board and for anyone watching this, constituents, everyone here, right? So our job is not to create a project to make people happy. Our job is we received a project, and our job is to review the ordinances, the zones, our manuals, and make sure it is meeting expectations. And that is what Evan is doing right now. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that. And so I guess what I would ask is, if our board has any other suggestions, comments, then we can go back to SAT staff as well and see how we can best support your concerns, leveraging the knowledge that we have before us through ordinances and zoning, right?
Well, procedurally, we wouldn't be able to table this and have it come back under a different, being reviewed under open space, right? It would have to be a separate public hearing because it would be being reviewed under a different.
Yeah, public notice would need to be given under the new zoning. Yeah. So again, it creates this whole thing where we're stuck.
Yeah. So now with the way to have it be reviewed before us under open space would be to make a motion to not pass it and have it come back before us because we don't want to. From what I understand, what you're saying is you don't want to reject this project based on the project itself, but under how we're reviewing it.
I agree with Evan on that one too. I don't know how does.
So how do we get this to come before us under open space without?
So I would say one, this is my opinion, right? So I'm not asking the board to acquiesce to anything that they don't want to acquiesce to. I'm one individual. Two, if you're asking me in terms of what my opinion would be, I would say not to deny this because ultimately I don't think there's necessarily grounds to deny it. My question is not whether or not it meets the criteria for a special exception or site plan review, but whether or not we're actually reviewing it under the correct zone. So there are multiple ways you can do that. One way you can do that is you can simply table something and just not bring it up. Again, so like, for instance, the city council just did this, okay? There was an ordinance seeking to delay implementation. They simply tabled before comment could be made, and if they don't take it back up, then that order dies. The same thing could happen to us. We could do the same thing. Procedurally, if your intent is to place it on the table permanently, it would be better to say to table this hearing indefinitely, and then simply have a new hearing based on.
The new hearing, would we suggest to staff to bring it before us, a new hearing, or is that something that is implied by our discussion up here?
We could ask, but I think procedurally what happens in a case like that is the applicant chooses to revise their application and then come before us again. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
So I'd like to hear from the board I'll let you do that, but after that I want to hear the other board's opinions too. So Darren, Dave, and Tim, but go ahead. He asked you a question.
So we would probably certainly do another hearing, obviously, if we tabled this. I think it's got enough attention from the public that we would probably want to do that and have another hearing. The other piece, though, is that the board could choose to review this under section 60-79(5). I think that we have critical. There's critical pieces to this project that that are on the wings, and it would be good to get the review. I don't know if procedurally if we're going to get a project that's any different than what we have now. And again, we need to look at the fact that we have approved structures and will continue to maintain those structures in the open space zone, which doesn't really have any kind of ordinance requirements or setbacks or uses that really are defined. And until we go back and maybe review a comp plan and update those things, I believe in 2020, prior to I first got here, there was some conversation with planning board, and unfortunately we weren't able to move that pendulum on that piece. But procedurally, 100%, if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're pushing, and that takes a lot of time, and that could have repercussions for the city for this project in the future. I'm trying to be as neutral as I can here, but that could be factual. We have grant money that's attached to this. We have ARPA money. There's timelines that are attached to this stuff.
Yeah. So.
And I just think that this would be, if we want to review the project, we could review it under another mechanism, the third mechanism, that you guys could do that tonight.
Yep. And I just want to add something.
Can we do that tonight, given that, what did the public notice say?
Yes.
We've had Sally climb up our tree so hard in the last 3 years about public notice and the fact that there was 1 or 2 words missing.
Yep. So our public notice said this proposal is pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 2, Site Plan Review, which could apply for both reviewing it under T42 or Conservation Open Space or the non-conforming use, and Division 14, Form-Based Code. So it leaves it open enough, I think, and I do believe that under site plan review, if we find that it meets the requirements of site plan review, not even necessarily special exception because that wasn't listed, although I do believe that it meets the requirements of special exception. I believe that if the board finds that the project does in fact meet the site plan review requirements, it does call out site plan review and it does call out form-based code. So I do still believe you have a few mechanisms, however, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
And I'm just going to add this one last piece. We did internally discuss this significantly, It's the size of the project, it's the square footage of the project that really kicked us into the special exception. Under the form-based code, anything greater than 12,000 square feet needs to go through the special exception criteria. And that's where we really thought that because of the size of the project, that kicks us this. I know that it may not 100% be in the zone, but the adjacent zone is this, and a portion of the project is in it. I think those two are very factual. And then that the fact that it is over 12,000 square feet, we felt like this should be going through special exception as well for additional scrutiny of the project and look through the project. So that's where staff landed, and that's
Personally, I'm in
where we're at.
agreement with you. I feel very comfortable using, that higher level of scrutiny, using that T 4.2B. Look, I feel personally okay with that, but I know Evan doesn't, so I don't know how the rest of the board feels. I don't know.
I just want to add that, or repeat what John believes had said earlier. We're increasing the footprint, but not changing the use. I think that's pretty important to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
I certainly like the project. I'm not against the project at all. And I think I could, for me, I guess I could go either way. I think I certainly understand and would actually, I like the additional scrutiny that was put on the project. However, I think I would have preferred the additional scrutiny, but yet going through the regular site plan or the conservation area, rather than looking like they're trying to make a building happen when really it's just a piece of the pavement that is allowing them to pull in a T42B connection. So
I think the project has merit, the project has need, and the project is located geographically where it needs to be for its purpose. I keep going back to what I mentioned earlier in our discussion regarding 6079-5 and abandonment. I mean, we definitely need it, and that's where I am. I could go either way. I'm very happy with the project. I think we're on a cusp, but 6079-5 is where I keep going.
Okay, so you would approve this? This is such a technical thing at this point in time, right? So we're all in favor of it. It's just under, what conditions we
Right,
approve it.
touching on
So-
what Darren said, it's important to remember we're changing a footprint, we're not changing a location, we're not changing a
Correct.
purpose.
Yeah.
And 6079-5 is, it's like Catherine said, when we go to public notice, it's encompassed in that as well.
Okay. So does anyone feel comfortable making a motion, leveraging what Tim had said around that? What was it, 60 what?
Section 6079, paragraph 5.
Okay. Oh, I have that down here. All right. If they make a motion under that 6079-5, what happens to all the conditions?
Conditions, I
Or
mean,
the
I think.
waivers, I'm sorry, the waivers.
Oh.
Sorry.
I think you would need to keep it for the access management, the paving those 5 spots, because that's in a different part of the ordinance. I don't think you would need to necessarily keep the other ones. John, I'm not sure if you agree with that.
Yep, that's exactly correct. The other piece is that you would want to address the 4 conditions under the site plan review, and specifically lay those out.
Would there be a way that this could pass with just the 4th waiver application regarding the off-street parking being the only waiver included in the motion, as the other three are applying to a building that's in an open space, so they don't really apply. Like the other three, like we said, are about T42 requirements, and they're occurring on open space. So the only thing that is not on the open space that would need to pass in this motion would be the fourth waiver, which is the off-street parking.
Okay. Is everyone on
Because
board with
why
that?
would, if they don't need those, the other three waivers, we could find that they're not necessary since it's not in that zone.
I'm sorry, not what?
Since they're in those variants, or not variances, those waivers, the window waiver, the building size waiver all apply to T4, 2B regulations and restrictions. And since those are occurring in open space zone, they don't need to be included. But the fourth one, that's not occurring in the open space zone, it's occurring on the off-street parking, would need to be included.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions around that? Riley, do you feel comfortable making a motion?
Well, no, because I don't, my question was whether or not that would allow the project to move forward. I guess my question would be for staff. If we said that we make a motion to approve it with only waiver request 4, would that be enough for the project to still move forward, or do the other 3 have to be met?
I think if you make a finding that you are reviewing it, I think especially if you call out the section of the ordinance that you are wanting to review it under, which is 6079.5, then that would be clear that the other waivers wouldn't be necessary. So you could add that to the finding.
But they would have to be reviewed under that. We couldn't, under the way we're currently reviewing it, just say that we don't grant the first 3, we only grant the 4th waiver.
I think if you are going to, the only reason I'm saying that, I hope I'm understanding, I think if you, because the notice says reviewing under form-based code, I think that it's safer to address those things, although they're kind of small aesthetic and building articulation items. However, I think that if you just specify that you are reviewing it under this other standard that doesn't require those, then I don't think it would affect the project to take those waivers out because they wouldn't apply. However, if you're reviewing it under T42, I do think you should keep them in because I believe the project would change a lot if the waivers came out.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot cleaner if you go through sections 60-79.5 and then reference the site plan review 1 through 4, those items. It would be a lot cleaner that way. And then there is one waiver, that the one section waiver, you would want to include that as well for the parking, for the pavement, not having pavement in that particular area. That's a seasonal parking area. It's gravel now, it's been gravel. So we weren't considering any pavement in that area. But there's over 5 parking spaces there.
I'm sorry?
John, are you referring?
There were no conditions on this. You were seeking no conditions. Additional conditions.
I would say no. We didn't write any down. I think we were assuming the regular permitting, all those appropriate ones. But we did not feel like we felt like the application covered everything that we were looking for. But if you wanted to add conditions, you're welcome to.
So you're saying there were no conditions?
Correct.
Okay, all right, perfect.
John, one question. When you said the site plan, the 4 site plan conditions, was that page 4 of 5, where it stated the project has met the requirements of Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 2?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
You what?
That didn't clear it up enough for me to have a motion for you.
I think I have one cleared up. Go for it. All right. I make a motion to approve the City of Auburn to replace the existing Police Activities League Center located at 24 Center Street, City Assessors Parcel ID 250-334, in accordance with Section 6079, Paragraph 5, to approve Section 60-607-12 waiver of off-street parking and loading requiring 5 or more parking spaces that must be paved, and approve the construction of the PAL Center located at 24 Center Street, Chestnut Street, City Assessors Parcel ID 250-334, which includes a demolition of the existing PAL Center to replace it with a 14,651 square foot single-story facility with a basketball court, teen room, multi-purpose meeting and storage rooms, bathrooms and showers, and a commercial kitchen, utility improvements, transportation, and pedestrian improvements along Chestnut Street to Winter Street and Walnut Street, a playground, parking lot, and community gardens.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
I'm going to make a motion to amend because staff asked for something quite specific. I assume that this was left out simply because of the complexity. Make a motion to amend to include a waiver request from Section 60-60712 off-street parking and loading, which states that all uses containing over 5 parking spaces shall be serviced with solid paving material. And based upon the findings that the site plan has met the requirements of Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 2, including the protection of adjacent, including conditions 1 through 4. Does that capture everything staff had wanted?
I think so.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, so I get a little turned around. Any discussion on it? Okay, seeing none, we vote on the amendment, correct? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion passes. So now we have on the table right now the original motion with an amendment. Any discussion to the original motion with the amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Excellent. All right, next item on the agenda is the public hearing, Camp K9 LLC, requesting a special exception in the general business zone.
Chair, I'd like to come to the board to provide some paper copies that I promised in an email, if that's okay.
Mother, may I? Yes, you may.
C'est fun, so. It's fun. We tried to do the right thing.
Yeah.
All right, we can get started. All right, so hand it over to staff because this has been before us already. I'll hand it over to staff to do a readout.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is for Camp Canine. It's essentially a doggy daycare. There was considerable discussion about this project the last time that was in front of the board, which was August 9th, 2022, which seems to me like it was yesterday. But there may be some folks that were not here then, and I just kind of want to recap that a little bit. The original proposal was for basically a day daycare for dogs, and as soon as you get into having more than 3 dogs outside on a lot, it constitutes a kennel. So there was a fair amount of talk around that, and then disposal waste and addressing protections of the environment was discussed. And they really were, and then at the end of the day, we didn't have a site plan, not one to scale. And since that time, the applicant has provided us a site plan. In addition to that, this is what we're looking at here. I don't believe is the latest site plan.
The latest too, the updates.
Staff had some additional review from the initial submission. You should have it in your packet, but one of the conditions was that we really heard the public last time, and we, as staff, we came up with ideas for putting in additional buffers to mitigate against the residential area that is, we'll just call the top of the plan north for, I don't know where the north arrow is. There it is the north arrow. So the top of the plan there is to the north, adding additional buffer that's found in green. The area in yellow, we really, again, pushing the outdoor kennel piece away from abutters, so that area identified in yellow is excluded from the site plan now. So we're not including that. And to the south, we're adding an additional buffer area. And then the plan is to have still 2 separate areas within that location that's identified. And it's one side's for big dogs and one side's for little dogs. And we looked at precedents that we did approve something like this in the general business district at 65 Washington Street as an accessory use. So we looked at precedents, and we felt like this was a set enough precedents that this should come in front of the planning board for approval. And we tried to, again, mitigate the most we could. The original proposal, I don't know if you can remember, would include 30 dogs outside, and that was quite a bit. And we've had internal discussions with our staff review, with our engineer, the planners, and the folks that are there, and we really wanted to, one, move the outdoor space more towards Center Street and away from the abutters, and then secondly, limit the use that's outdoors. They actually, and this was part of this change here at the last minute. We don't necessarily like giving you guys information at the last minute, but there was a question. Riley actually had this specific question about the wishy-wash material and how that was going to affect the environment. We had our engineering consultant, an environmental engineer at Woodard and Curran, look at the material, and that's a condition that we're including. I'll go through the conditions, but that's a condition from the product that they were saying that they were going to apply to the ground, to the pavement. That's a product that the staff is not recommending that we use. There'll have to be other mitigations that will have to be applied, or the daily pickup of twice a day should be enough. But we're minimizing now the dog use to only 3 dogs per side. And it's really the criteria for that, the definition of a kennel, where we landed on that number. We're really limiting the use, and it's really now considered an accessory use. It takes a little bit of understanding their business. They have 18 or so dogs that they can groom in a day, and all those 18 dogs come in at different times. It could be a half hour, 45-minute increments. And the dog may be only there for 2 or 3 hours. So the dogs, not all the dogs will be out at the same time, and now we're gonna limit them to 3 at a time. And I'm gonna just go down through the conditions, and I think that it's important for this site to be considered by the planning board. I think there'll be some discussion of that, but we're, again, trying to mitigate as best we could, but still make an accessory use that was very similar, again, in a different location in the city. We suggest that we're limiting hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The entire perimeter of the outside fence shall be shielded with a solid fence or fencing accessory cover. There shall be fewer dogs at the facility than are groomed daily, given the outdoor space of 8,000. So that's 8,000 square feet. That updated space that we have, when we eliminate the yellow space, anything that's in blue there, that's what's existing. It's about 8,000 square feet. We're ensuring an accessory and a value-add status to the existing business, which with a limited outdoor use of 1/3 or a max of 6 dogs at a time. So again, the mitigation plan is for either side to have only 3 dogs max, right? There's going to be a separation from the little dogs to the big dogs. That makes sense from an operational standpoint too. You don't want the big dogs picking on the little dogs, so. And then adhere to the plan in place for alleviating any barking nuisance resulting from the doggy daycare. Adhering to the waste plan to address pet waste generated on site. That's picking up twice a day, and then maybe doing a thorough scrub once a week with a material that's environmentally safe. Add or keeping existing buffers limited to the outside dog area and identified on the plan. Again, we're looking at moving most of that outside area to the Central Street corridor. There's a garage there. We further looked at this site and the plan. There was some discussion about the garage being used by the applicant the last time as maybe shade or something like that. We looked at the garage plan, and that's only permitted for residential use. So this is a condition of this approval, that this garage cannot be used as that. Again, which really limits the amount of time the dog is out, and the rotation of those dogs in and out is important. So they just can't leave the dog out there for 4 or 5 hours if it's hot and they're on pavement. Obviously, they're not gonna do that. So. We thought that was a good mitigation. They cannot expand the dog yard or anything with the project without planning board approval, so we're saying they need to come back. And then the wishy-wash system for sanitation, there's again a letter from the engineer, the environmental engineer, that this is a product that doesn't comply with the NEPD's discharge permit, and a section of our ordinance for discharges under section 15. That's something that I wasn't familiar with until we had them look at that. That was something that was brought to the attention from our planning board member, Mr. Bergeron, and we thought it was important to address it. That's all I have at this point.
Okay, so any questions for staff before we bring the applicant up?
My question might be for the applicant too, is the one of the conditions is to adhere to the waste plan, and you mentioned the once-a-week scrub. What is being used in place of the wishy-washy in that plan?
So we're suggesting a Dawn applicant. We didn't put that as a condition, but as we discussed it with the environmental engineer, Dawn is used as something that in an oil spill, they use it to wash animals, and it's pretty environmentally safe, and obviously dilute that. So that would be a material that staff recommends. The applicant is not aware that we had this study done. We just, unbeknownst to them, we just got this information and we didn't have a chance to share it with them. So I don't know if they have a substitute for that. They could consider water at this point, just water, picking up the solids and using just spray water down would be another, thing that would be not as intrusive as this material that they suggest.
I have a quick clarifying question. I see two different nomenclatures here. I see Wishy-Wash and Effersan. Is Effersan the same thing, just a trademark name?
I believe it is, but the Wishy-Wash is the material that we looked at.
We've got a couple of things that are referenced. One, providing that it remains less than the primary use, as well as the maximum number of dogs allowed outside at a time. And I'm just curious as to what mechanism does the city have to actually monitor and enforce those requirements, if we include them in the motion?
So, I mean, those could be, site visits that we make. We actually have ordinances where we're restricting number of animal units on a particular lot, particularly in the ag zone. We could certainly go there, and if there's a complaint, count the number of dogs that are outside, and that could be enforceable.
I have a question about that same condition. It says, there should not be at any one time less than the number present for grooming on any given day. So remove the clause that says there should not be less than the number present for grooming. Did you mean there should not be? Is it supposed to be there should be?
So we're saying the 18, the number of dogs inside. So we're trying to limit the amount of actual dogs. So the applicant mentioned 18 in a conversation, so that's what I was referring to.
Right. So you're saying, I just don't understand the condition. It says there should not be, if you get rid of the clause at any one time. So there should not be less than the number present for grooming.
It probably was meant to be should not be more than or should be less than, I imagine.
There should not be, so more than as opposed to less, because that would make sense. Okay.
Yes.
And with respect to Tim's comments and Riley's comments, are there any instances where companies are required to receive approval to utilize a certain chemical at their business, but they're required to get that approval from the city? I ask only because, important note that this was a brand name of a generic chemical, which is why the SDS wasn't based on the brand name, it was based on the chemical. But Mr. Bergeron asked about, what would they use? And I guess to me, it would seem the logical condition would be to say that they have to receive approval for anything they're using from the city. But is that something that the city regularly does or could do?
We could look at that. We're relatively sensitive. I'm learning more about this under our NEPD's discharge permit. We could go back to whatever they decide, if it's outside of water or Dawn soap. If it's outside of that, we could go back to our city engineer and ask our consultant to look at that. That would certainly be a condition that you could we could include.
Conversely, we couldn't require them to use Dawn, just so, because that wouldn't be in our purview to require that it be the one thing that is.
Right, yeah, so I
under
think
discharge
using
permit.
general terms that meets the requirements of the NEPTE's discharge permit in section, whatever it is, that would be the appropriate language.
I don't think we're going to remember that. Can we say approved by staff?
Yes.
Any other questions for staff?
One, the suggested motion incorporates a taxi service, which is not anywhere in the packet at all. There's no comments. There's no. Was there any review or needs associated with it? I'm curious as to why it's even here, given that there's no other reference to it anywhere in the pack.
Yeah, it was just a general comment that they would be able to provide taxi services. There's not, again, the use is 18 a day. They're not looking to expand that anyway. If they do, then they got to come back to planning board. We're really restricting them on that.
So I can check, but I'm imagining that the taxi service use was because it was brought up in the original proposal and the site plan at that point, and there were some things that needed some changing. So that motion, the suggested motion kind of carries forward with the same proposal, but with the amendments, which were the new site plan, less dogs, etc.
Okay, yeah, I didn't, not seeing like any traffic impact study or anything concerning, taxi. I was just curious as to, or changes to the parking flow or anything like that. So I was just curious why it's there.
No, there's no plan changes as far as that's concerned.
Okay, any other questions before we bring the applicant forward? Okay, seeing none, applicant, feel free to come forward.
Good evening. I think John's done a pretty good job of explaining what what we've all come up with for a resolution to the site plan. I really don't have much more to add other than what he's provided you guys already. Free to answer any questions if you have them.
What would you use in place of which, if you had your...
Well, as this has just come as news to me, off the top of my head, I'd have to do some research and find something that's a little more, something that's biodegradable and a little more environmentally friendly. But I would agree to, obviously, if there's some sort of a, regulation on it, we'll make sure that it fits within that regulation.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay.
All good?
All right.
Thanks.
So at this point in time, I would seek a motion to open up public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Excellent. Okay, if you would like to come forward, state your name, your address, and 5 minutes.
Carolyn Collins, 40 Newell Avenue in Auburn. I just had a couple of questions. Initially, it was a year and a half ago, the issue of cleaning up what was going to be used, and right now he doesn't know what he's going to be using to disinfect all the doggy doo and pee that's going to be out in the yard. Another issue was that initially it was going to be 30 dogs, and now it is just down to 18 maximum. Is that what I'm correctly hearing? And I'm just wondering if that's setting a precedent as far as a year down the road, he can open it back up or request 30 to 50 dogs, which I hear was the initial plan for the doggy daycare. What control do we have as an abutting neighbor to prevent it growing into a larger facility? That's all. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, anyone else like to come forward? And we'll address your questions after we close public comment.
Steve Damian, 703 South Witham Road. So about the dogs, they're gonna clean up every day after them, twice a day, I think I heard, and they're gonna wash the surface. Is this a hard surface that's washable? Is it paved? Is it grass? I didn't hear what that was gonna be. You folks might have that information. But if you're gonna clean up after them and wash the surface, how are you gonna do that when it's winter time? That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carrie Isett, and I live at 36 Newell Avenue. And I'll just quickly say, I just bought the house in November, and this is all news to me. But my first question is it a doggy daycare or is it a grooming shop? They're two very, very different businesses. And then second, I'm greatly concerned about safety issues. What I'm hearing, correct me, if I miss something, please, is that the cleanup of this facility would happen only twice a day, which for a multitude of dogs is not enough. With 18 dogs, you'd have a lot of poop. But safety issues is the applicant and the planning board aware of that deadly diseases, two animals are carried in the feces of dogs? Parvo, a dog, even with medical treatment, often dies of parvo. Yes, Dawn takes grease out of feathers and fur, but that is not a disinfectant. There are special, and water would do nothing except to wash away the urine and feces. For animal shelters, kennels, grooming facilities, there are certain products that are on the market and need to be used that basically, in a simple word, disinfect. And I'm somewhat shocked to hear that that's not mentioned. This product, Wishy-Washy, I'm not familiar with, but the chemical in it might be, one that's used under different brand names. But, so I'm greatly concerned to hear that a standard of care, of disinfection in this type of business, whether it be a daycare or a grooming shop that does nail trims and haircuts and so forth, that the cleaning, part of the approval would be that, that those standards of care are in place. So for starters, those, my one question about what is the purpose of the business, and then, the safety issues around cleanup and disinfection. It's serious. If a dog comes in there with, that is sick, and it can very easily, it's the absolute bane of and extreme point of concern for any city animal shelter or a kennel. Check with the Humane Society here. They have those procedures in place, I'm quite sure. But Dawn and a rinse with water at any time of year isn't going to do it. So I would definitely want to hear more about that. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward? Okay, seeing none, I will seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor? Okay. I did hear some questions, so I will let folks start the conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify 18 or 20. We have heard that both. I think it looks like it's 20 based on our packet.
So it's 18 total, and that's for indoor use. Those are the dogs that are coming indoors. At any one time, there won't be more than 6 dogs outdoors. In 2 separate areas, meaning 3 dogs in each area. Those are the totals. But those dogs may rotate. Of the 18, some might be coming and going. So there could be implications of impacts greater than 6 dogs at the site, but we really limited it from what was originally proposed.
So is the suggested motion meant to read 18 and not 20?
Yes. Yep. We unfortunately, you've got different variations of the copy there. We went from 30 to 20 down to 18 after our conversation with the applicant. So,
A member of the public asked about the area being disinfected. Is that area impervious, i.e. paved, or is it pervious?
it's impervious. It's all pavement. So, yeah. And I think that the disinfectant piece needs to be worked out. I think the applicant had a good, let's figure out a product and let's bring it back to our environmental engineer. Make sure that, because that wishy-wash did take care of those diseases that the dogs could carry. And I think that, the risk management portion of the business, we should relook that and make sure that we get the provided disinfectant that we need, but we're also protecting from the environment with the NEPD's discharge permit. So I think that those are valid points.
The applicant would like to make a comment.
We are, to answer for some of this, and I think it'll help kind of clear everything up a little bit, is we will be, back when I first started this, we were inspected by the state, animal welfare, as a kennel. We passed flying colors, no issues. That will be we will have to do that again. I'll have to, basically not reapply for the license, but get inspected again before we open to that capacity and have that done. But they set forward some chemicals that are required, like there's certain types of chemicals that we can use and certain ones we can't. That's handled at that time when they do that inspection, as well as they inspect for cleanliness and inside and outside. That's all part of what they do in their inspection when they grant us a license to have the dogs there. Because we will have to maintain a license under the requirements with the state as a kennel. So that's where those procedures will come into play. Just wanted to clarify that.
Next. So it sounds like there's a requirement for sanitation. Thank goodness. I would assume there would be. I will be honest, on the staff, I feel ill-equipped. Do we know whether we can put this condition on and the applicant can still find a disinfectant that meets the requirements?
So I think we could put the condition on there. If we can't find a suitable material, they have to have materials out there. We just haven't vetted it yet. We haven't had the time to work with the applicant on that. I'm sure that ACF, Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, that permits these kennels, and they have 2 vets that are under the staff under ACF that I know. We could probably consult with them and say, hey, do you have other issues around NEPD's discharge? And, oh, by the way, how are we addressing this? And they probably have some materials. Unfortunately, we looked at this material specifically in the application, and we just got the information yesterday afternoon, and today was a blur, and I just didn't run it to ground.
My My thoughts on that are, it is unfortunate because, like you said, the timing of it, we're just springing it on the applicant right now. But I would be more comfortable knowing what the waste plan involved, and if that required talking to the Humane Society to see what they use as suggested, or what is that meets the discharge permits but also meets the health standards before, instead of making it as a condition. I think it would be a better part of the application.
I agree with Riley.
Yeah, I feel like we could bang it out by saying it has to meet the conditions of these two things. I don't even have enough information to be able to identify what the health requirement is. So how do you write that condition? I agree with Riley. It's sort of like more information needed.
Yep, just one more thought for that. The other thing is, it sounds to me as if the sanitation requirements will have to be met for the business to open. And I'm thinking about that similarly to how we review and pass some other projects, right? Like we look at the zoning, but then we also need the Army Corps of Engineers to issue their permit. My thought here is, it could be a way to put it through that the board could say yes on the condition that you get approval from this higher regulating body that actually does look at sanitation. Sometimes as planning staff, we really try to hit every single button, although there are those, sometimes we try to cover the ones that other agencies also cover. So it's really, I think, to be extra safe, but that's just some food for thought.
Which part of the licensing process would be the one that you said that to get to operate the business? Who would grant that license for the sanitation? How would that be worded in a condition?
That's the state approval for the kennel. So they have to go through that approval process.
Do they have to get approved every time they change whatever they're using?
If there's a change in use, then they would have to, or a change in the business type, then they would have to go back.
I apologize. Change in use was bad because we're at a planning board meeting. If they change the chemical they are using to disinfect the yard, so not a change in use in terms of if they change the chemical they're using to disinfect their yard, do they have to go back and get approval for that? Is that like a?
They probably I can't speak for the state and their processes and how they inspect or do anything like that. It would behoove them to do that, but I can't say for sure that they require it. They'll do. I know that there's state health inspections, and those could be done yearly, and those kinds of questions could be asked and addressed at that particular point in time. But I can't say for sure that each of if they change the materials, that they're submitting that information to the state for approval, and say all veterinary places or anything like that. I don't know the answer.
But does that lack of clarity on that specific, how often they have to be relicensed and things like that, or how often that would be checked, would be the reason I would. And I feel bad because this plan has gone through a lot of changes to address a lot of the concerns we had when it first came through. But I think it'd be wise to know what that waste management plan is.
I guess I appreciate Catherine's comments earlier about, that we often come as part of our motion that something is, conditioned on the applicant getting other approvals. Be it city approval for whatever is used and or state reviewed, whatever the language is. I think if we get the language correct, we don't need to revisit this. I'd be willing to incorporate it into the motion and if we're able to figure out what it is.
Any other thoughts? deliberation? If not, I would ask for a motion.
So actually, so what you're saying is to condition it on the licensing. One of the conditions be that first we'd have to name the department that does the licensing, but they got that obtained that licensing, which would thereby mean that they were using something that could be discharged safely.
Yeah, basically that the applicant, once obtaining approval for the kennel from the state, would then review the chemicals that are required and obtain city approval for those, so that basically if they're not able to get both the state approval as well as the city's review for the discharge, then the applicant isn't able to open, rather than waiting to get all the details and the specifics. And because what happens if the chemical were to be changed, or they've got 3 or 4 options, and now we're looking at which one's maybe most economical to use, rather than specifying exactly what they're going to use. I would be comfortable saying if they're able to obtain the appropriate permitting and that the chemicals are reviewed and approved by the city, that would be what I would suggest.
I just don't know that permitting process though, so we're assuming that the waste management and the chemicals will be reviewed in that permitting process, but I don't know that, because I don't know the department that would even be in charge of reviewing that. That's why I feel it's tough for me to use that as condition. The city approval, it would be something I'd lean more towards, but putting it in the hands of a process we're not even specifying, I'm not sure that's the...
If I could add that, I would note that it would be the Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, and it's specifically under the Division of Agriculture, and it's the state veterinarian that would review and approve that information. That's my experience.
And part of that is the assessment of the chemicals used to clean and sanitize?
That's correct, yep.
What's the beginning, the agricultural, you said what, ACF?
Yeah. Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. It's the department. And the ag is basically the bureau, and then the veterinary is down to the division.
Okay, I like that was specific. I'm worried, what if tonight we misspeak in choosing that and it turns out there's so could we say something that the waste management program utilizes sanitary product in accordance with any federal, state, or local regulations, subject to its approval from planning staff for use in accordance with, what's the depth of, what is it? Or we could just say planning for.
I think that's all, I think the first piece is all you need to say, state and local approvals, and reference the review of the product. That's it. I mean,
do you think, does that kind of meet for you what you're thinking?
It takes care of it for me, that's for sure.
I like that too. It's a much more, I like it. And having something more clarifying that meets municipal, state, and federal guidelines for pollution or stuff. We need something like that. We can't just have a blank canvas.
I think Mr. Sears hot in the presses here.
All right, let's do this.
Well, Mr. DeRoche did such a good job earlier coming up with a solution, I felt like I had to jump in. I make a motion to approve, this is a An odd, okay. I make a motion to approve and grant the special exception to Camp Canine LLC at 314 Center Street, parcel ID 271-021, to allow a doggy daycare and taxi service for up to 18 dogs with the following conditions. Business hours shall be limited from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The entirety of the perimeter of the outside fenced area shall be shielded with a solid fence or fencing accessory cover. There should not be at any one time more than the number of dogs present for grooming on any given day in the outdoor area, and the outdoor area, the number of dogs in the outdoor area be limited to 1/3 of the total of 18 or a max of 6 dogs at one time. That the applicant adhere to the plan in place for alleviating any barking nuisance resulting from the doggy daycare. That the applicant adhere to the waste plan to address pet waste generated on site. That this one's also written a little weird. Add or keep existing buffers and limit the outside dog area to the area identified on the plan. That the garage on site is to be used as storage or residential use and not for the business. That the site plan and use cannot expand the dog yard without planning board approval. And that a sanitation product be used as part of the sanitation plan in accordance with any federal, state, or local regulations only after approval from planning staff.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do you have discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All right, excellent, motion carries. Alrighty, so the next item on the agenda is a public hearing, comprehensive plan map amendment. So just to kind of get everyone up to speed, and my apologies, I had to miss November and December's meeting, so I had to get up to speed as well. So in your packets, this is the item whereby there was a recommendation, I believe, discussion in prior planning board meetings, the end of last year, to actually amend the future land use zoning ordinance. I think I said that correctly. And this is a motion to make a favorable or not a favorable recommendation to City Council. So we're not addressing this item number 5. We're not addressing the petition from the applicant. We are addressing amending the City Council, the zone map in general, and this is going to the City Council. This is just a favorable, unfavorable recommendation. I just wanted to kind of like level set for everybody on that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good summary. So, what we're doing, so this, it looks as though it's a zone change map before you. It's not. It's really what the proposal is to make a recommendation to council to amend or to not amend the future land use plan map within the comprehensive plan. The reason we got here is that in connection with the petition, which we will hear about next, at the last meeting, we discussed amending the 3 parcels that are past the turnpike and abutting the other parcels down south on Riverside Drive. We discussed amending those to rural residential, but procedurally, because they did not match the future land use plan map boundaries, the planning board wanted to see also a comprehensive plan proposal comprehensive plan amendment to make a recommendation on. It is in your purview to make a comprehensive plan recommendation, to initiate one. that is something you're able to do. The comprehensive plan future land use map is a general pattern for future development. It's developed every 10 years or so, and zoning and development patterns generally follow that, although it's not a zoning map again. So this amendment does not say what can or cannot be done there. It does say suburban development district. That's not the same as suburban residential district as in zoning. That's a term in the future land use map that calls for, I think, up to 8 units per acre. That's not what's being proposed here. That's just to extend the comprehensive plan boundaries over following that 1% flood hazard risk line. I hope that was clear, but if not, then I can clarify more.
So that makes sense to everybody, right? Okay. So we had this petition come before us. It is not in alignment with the comp plan. So then the recommendation is to make an amendment to the comp plan in the event there is a favorable recommendation to change this, these parcels of land. So any questions for staff before I open it up to public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll seek a motion to open up public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Okay, public comment. You have 5 minutes. State your name and your address.
Hi, George Estabrook, 962 Riverside Drive in Auburn. Excuse my voice, I'm suffering from a pretty good cold here. Thank you, Catherine and Jason, and also Eric for listening to me on the phone and helping me guide me through some of the questions that I had here. I want to speak from the heart a little bit here, then I want to talk about process. My wife is born and raised across the street from this land. I've lived in that neighborhood for 47 years now, so it's not something that's new to us. We've been long stewards, I've hunted and fished the river from that land, and we built a house there. We raised our kids in Auburn. We care about the city of Auburn and the place that we live in. We built our house 32 years ago. Did all the right things and being a good citizen of Auburn. I coached Auburn Suburban Little League for 6 or 7 years. I coached Auburn Youth Hockey. There's a point to this at the end, so I'm just, and was on the Auburn Hockey Board when we broke away from Lewiston Hockey. My wife also partook in all of those things that go along with raising kids and being part at the ballpark and at the hockey rink, being team on and thing. With all of that, it's a little disappointing as her and I look to retirement this year and making a budget, and that budget being based on 15% of our retirement income right now is going towards Auburn taxes. Who knows what that'll be if the change goes through for rural residential, and especially with riverfront property. I have no idea what the tax or what comps are in Auburn for the tax assessor to base that on, but I'm sure it's going to be more expensive. So I feel as though, or my wife and I feel as though somewhat that we're in a coastal town and we could be possibly taxed or forced to sell our land because we can't afford the tax on our property. So that's from the personal side. Process-wise, I don't understand the first paperwork that we received was for a budding neighbor to have his changed to rural residential, and that's fine. I'm a big believer in people have the opportunity to do what they want with their land, and if you have the opportunity and you can be successful at that, then good for you. I just don't understand the process how our land got pulled into this, and I haven't had a good explanation other than we don't want to or we just don't want to pick this property and not those other two properties that surround it. We did not petition for this property to be changed land designation wise. So again, I really don't understand why we are being drawn into this, for lack of better words. I understand the city's desire, and I understand housing issues and those such things, but I've worked hard bringing those fields, since I've owned that land, both of those fields back to their original glory of where they were. They were neglected for years upon years, and that center field that's petitioning is still neglected. I've done all the right things. Again, worked hard on that land, bringing it back, removing the brush. And as far as our land and our house is in a trust now, but as long as my wife and I are alive, we will not be selling that land for housing development. We enjoy the wildlife there. We have a pretty diverse habitat there with the river in our backyard, with the fields there, and then with Bill Sylvester's woodland next to us. And it's a pretty unique habitat, and there's not many of us that can say that we can walk in our backyard and see a bald eagle's nest. And so that's really where I'm talking about keeping that land green as it was planned to be in the comprehensive plan originally. Thank you.
Anyone else like to come forward?
Stephen Beal at 575 Johnson Road. There's been a lot of discussion about process and procedures relative to the planning board, both tonight and in the recent past, and I have some questions about the process and the procedure here.
Regarding this item, right?
Regarding this item. Because this seeks to make a change to a map which is a part of the comprehensive plan. Agenda item 5 notes that the future land use plan is not a zoning map. Certainly the planning board, as well as the city council or a petition, may seek to amend both either text or the map of an existing zoning ordinance. But this is a part of a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan, and while my understanding is that the planning board may be looked to for input and recommendations to an amendment to the comprehensive plan, my understanding is also that the comprehensive plan review has to originate with an order or resolve from the city council. And I am unaware of any order or resolve from the city council asking the planning board to make a recommendation for a change to the future land use map component of the city plan, of the comprehensive plan. So I'd appreciate some enlightenment on that.
All right, anyone else from the public like to come forward? Okay, see, you've got someone, oh, excellent, thank you.
My name's William Sylvester. I live at 1128 Riverside Drive, Auburn.
That's you. That's me. That's us.
It's not all floodplain. And environmentally, that is split right in half with a wetland. There's a knoll toward the river. These houses were here. This knoll. So rain sold off this. Things changed hands. This doesn't show that.
No, there's a brick in there, yeah. Mm-hmm, yeah, I see it.
One part of it goes this way, the other part goes up this way.
Sorry, can we ask you to speak into the microphone? Because I think people, you know, are watching on TV, and I think they like to hear it too.
That road that goes across there now is a farm road. It doesn't have to be used 24/7. There's no people, there's no school buses, there's nothing going over there. That's kind of difficult access. And it may inundate too. That's a muskrat bog in there and quite a lot of the culvert. So I just want to say that. Then, so along comes some houses, and in the 60s, where the trailer is there, the further one north on the river road, that's landfill under there. There's cement blocks, there's tires, rims, dirt, gravel, and then the trailer got there. So, okay, that's some of the background. Now, the people at the time wanted to keep it ag. Already have sold 4 house lots off. Now they got an idea, maybe, of building more houses. So, that's a change of use. In the first place, it was going to be well, Eric had told me, Eric Cousins said, this is all rural residential from the Turnpike Bridge to the Durham line, because it's floodplain, it's not very wide. Well, I never could figure out how I got charged for taxes if it was 400 feet of that and then down to the ag zone after that, because I've got 792 feet of river between my house and the river. So thank goodness to your photogrammetry gal that did all the mapping, the GPS stuff. She said, well, no, you're all in the rural residential. So I said, oh, that makes sense now. So what we've got up there is a special exception to start with to take it out of rural residential, a higher tax break. That, in my case, I've got land in the ag zone and rural residential, and it's 10 times higher per acre in ag, in rural residential than it is ag. So that's some of the indication that you were talking about you don't know what it's going to be. Well, you don't kind of figure out this taxation after the fact. So we've got that thing out there. Now these people want to turn it back into rural residential, probably for to sell houses. And another thing, I can't understand why somebody that doesn't want their land rezoned gets it rezoned. That doesn't sound right. Here's 20 acres roughly, half belongs to one party and half belongs to another party. Whoever's applying for it can't apply for somebody else's rezoning. Right. I wouldn't think. So, anyway, the tax implication is another thing that I think this might be a precedent setter. In tree growth, when you draw land out of tree growth, in ag zone, residential, towns, cities, anywhere in the state, there's a penalty. Now, when we talked in the ag zone about withdrawing land, changing zoning, we weren't saying that people's land, they'd have to pay a penalty on it because it was in ag and then it became more valuable by going into rural resource, because those people had to put their land into the ag zone. That's the way it came up. Public hearings, a lot of fighting and wrangling back and forth.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Your 5 minutes are up. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, anyway.
No.
The taxation thing
I appreciate
is
it.
an issue.
I do. I appreciate it, sir. I really try. I give the city manager 5 minutes. I give everyone 5 minutes, so I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, anyway, that could be a precedent, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good evening.
You too. All right, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'll seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
All right, do you have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Excellent, great. Okay, any discussion for staff? And again, this is just a motion to send a favorable or not favorable recommendation to City Council to amend this parcel of land.
I guess I do have one, because I am sensitive both to the desire of individuals to request the amendment, but also those that may be impacted that are surrounding the area. We don't have really a mechanism whereby if through deed or whatever, even if we were to make a change, they can say, well, until such point where I sell or the deed changes hands, we allow it to actually stay. Like, but there's no really way to accomplish the will of both without, I mean, I'm just trying to find, does that concept even exist?
So that's a good question, David. There is, you can put your, there's you can put your land in conservation land, you can put your land in farmland. There is tax benefits to those, and so it doesn't matter on the zoning. You can apply for those and apply those, and you do get, there's a tax benefit to that. I don't know, the assessor really is the person that you would go through this information, and there's implications for the number of years, and if you pull out of it, you've got to pay it back and things like that. But there is a mechanism to protect those that don't want to develop their land, and to provide some security from taxes.
And that applies to land in any zone.
That's correct. As long as you apply the proper paperwork and dedicate your land to a tree zone, or they have certain terms, or ag zone, or agricultural uses, or forestry uses. Tree growth is the proper term, I guess. Then you could do that, and they have the same provision for ag as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, thoughts?
Well, there was a question raised, and I think we should address it. It's actually come to my attention that there are particular municipal officials that have told residents that the planning board doesn't have authority to act on this. In fact, it seems as though they've made a very strong argument for that. So, state statute, you're going to find this under Title 30A, and it has to do with growth management programs. That you don't utilize the term. They rarely use the term planning board, and they don't really use the term comprehensive plan, but they do utilize growth management plans, which in the definition section is a comprehensive plan, and they utilize planning committees, which they also define as being planning boards, are given the authority to actually create comprehensive plans and put them forward, not given the authority to finalize those as adopted. That's only vested in the legislative body in the city. In this case, it would be the city council, but it could be some board of selectmen somewhere else, so on and so forth. So it's codified in state ordinance, and then sort of reiterated within local ordinance under section 2-475, talking about the jurisdiction and authority of the planning board, being given the authority to prepare and recommend to the city council changes in and amendments to the comprehensive plan as necessary. So it's important. I think this is a case where there were a lot of people telling a lot of people a lot of things, and it really comes down to what does the language say, and where's that at? I think part of the confusion may have been that sometimes people see the planning board do things. For instance, we approved site plans earlier. Those will not go to the city council. We're the final adjudicatory body on that. Okay, and that's vested to us within state statute. Okay, so state law and local ordinance, that authority is vested to us. But in general, in the state, the only body that has legislative authority within a municipality are the municipal officers. So not officials, but officers. In our case, that would be your town council, okay, our city council, or if you have Board of Selectmen, and so on and so forth. So the planning board can always suggest that ordinances be changed. The planning board can always suggest that there be a change to the comprehensive plan. Ultimately, who makes that decision, though, is the city council. So the planning board doesn't actually make these changes, but the planning board does have the authority to initiate that process. So just as a way of clarifying that, so people understand, when we say, well, the planning board can do this, what we're saying is the planning board can ask the council to change something. We can initiate that process. Only the council has authority to actually change it because it's legislation.
I really appreciate that, Evan, and you are an incredible wealth of knowledge. So I do appreciate that, by the way. And to that end as well, you are a planning board member, right? So I appreciate that. If anyone from constituents have any questions around what Evan said, I would absolutely recommend that you go to staff and have a conversation with staff about it, because that has been vetted through staff, and they can also articulate and support what Evan had said.
Yeah, and if I could add, I appreciate that information. We did reference the section there that Evan referenced as well. Just to further, just kind of finalize that whole conversation in the process, after it goes through council, we still have to submit that that information and the update to the state, and it goes to the state, what is the defunct state planning office, but they look at it in compliance with what's called the Growth Management Act. They review against that. So we also get an additional state approval on that as well, just to clarify.
So I appreciate that. I'm going to say this one last thing, too. I really appreciate that. Staff, right? John, you're part of staff, and I appreciate that. And what I will say is we are here at this very moment to have a conversation about changing this zone, right? Or making a recommendation to City Council. We are not here to argue or discuss and support whether we have the ability to do this or not. So if any constituents out there question the process, please go to city staff and ask if the process was followed. If you have questions around the items on the agenda, more than happy to hear it. But if you have questions around how the process and how it got on there, I would suggest you go to staff on that.
I just wanted to add, it also, the Growth Management Act, but people should know that that has to deal with consistency too. So they were going to require that any changes you make are actually consistent.
Dog with a bone. No, I know. So, okay, right now, I just kind of want to recalibrate for everybody. So at this point in time, we are reviewing the item on the agenda to make a favorable or not favorable recommendation to City Council, because they are the ones that ultimately will make the recommendation on this. If we rezone those 3 parcels of land from ag to low-density rural residential or rural residential zoning.
This is not a zone plan change.
This is to go to City Council.
This is a comprehensive.
This is a comprehensive
Thank
plan
you.
update.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion to recommend amending the future land use map in the comprehensive plan to designate parts of the city's assessors parcel IDs 174-004, 174-004-001, and 174-004-002 land use from agricultural district to suburban development district following the FEMA 1% chance annual floodplain boundary as shown on the attached sketch map prepared for the January 9th, 2024 Planning Board meeting.
I think you may have read that wrong.
Yeah, this is the one where we, it would be, I make a motion to forward a favorable.
Call for a second.
Can I have a second? Can I have a second?
Second.
I was going to say, because then she can kill the motion for lack of second. They're in a.
Can I withdraw?
Yes, you can also pull your.
All right, I'm gonna withdraw. Am I on the wrong, do I have my packet out of order?
And Dave, I would feel really comfortable if you made that motion and then cited specific findings of fact for making that motion, which
So I'll make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to City Council to amend the official, hold on a minute. This is zoning map. I thought we were doing the other one.
I make a motion to recommend.
Thank you.
Amending the future land use plan map and the comprehensive plan to designate parts of the city assessor's parcel IDs 174-004, 174-00401, and 174-004-002, land use from agriculture district to suburban development district, following the FEMA 1% chance annual floodplain boundary as shown in the attached sketch map prepared for the January 9th, 2024 Planning Board meeting, with the findings of fact that 1, the proposed amendment aligns with the growth pattern existing along Riverside Drive. 2, Section 2-752 of the Auburn Code, Section 2-4752 of the Auburn Code of Ordinances provides jurisdiction and authority, stating that among other powers, the Planning Board has the jurisdiction and authority to prepare and recommend to the City Council changes in and amendments to the comprehensive plan as necessary. And 3, that the proposed future land use plan, the proposed future use plan amendment is supported by the text of the comprehensive plan.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Do you have any discussion? All right, all those in favor? All those opposed? All right, motion carries. All righty. Item number 6, public hearing map amendment tabled from December 12th. Again, same parcel IDs. So this is directly addressing the petition that was brought forth to us with this area.
Right. So just a quick reminder for everyone here. So what we're doing tonight for both the comprehensive plan recommendation, which we just made a favorable recommendation on, which the board just made a favorable recommendation on, and this next one, which is a zoning map amendment, the board will make a recommendation, but then the council, so the city council will have 2 readings, at which time they can make a favorable or unfavorable or they can make a favorable or unfavorable decision. They will have the final say, and so they will have 2 readings, and you will get notified for those readings when they come up if you want to come and speak there too. So this is just a tabled item from last meeting. It is to change the zoning on the 3 parcels, 174-004, which is 1.3 acres, 174-004-001, which is 9.5 acres, and 174-004-002, which is 7.4 acres, from agriculture and resource protection to rural residential, following the 1% annual flood chance hazard line. It says 0.2% annual chance in the suggested motion, and I think we're talking about the boundary there, so like the inside boundary of the 2% chance and the outside boundary of the 1% chance, so really either one works there. But we got here because we initially got the petition to rezone the single parcel between the 3, so just 174-004-001, and then because it had it was a funny zoning pattern. There were questions about whether it was spot zoning. The board wanted to see a map that showed all 3 parcels, So today we want to make a recommendation, positive or negative, about rezoning those 3 parcels for then the council to make the final decision.
Perfect. All right, any questions? Okay, any questions? Going once?
What did we formally do with the petition? Did we deny it? We just tabled it.
Yeah.
So we're either doing this, or we're taking that off the table and doing just the 1 lot. This is why we said it this way, because we wanted to say we considered doing the 1, or we wanted to see what it looked like doing the 3. Yeah?
I think that's what the intention was.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm remembering what that whole, yeah.
Fair enough.
Procedurally, we may need to address the actual petition, though. We need to make sure we reference the petition in the recommendation.
Yeah, I believe we're required to make a recommendation on that petition, so.
Right, so we need to address that, and then you could have an additional recommendation go forward to council for a vote.
John, isn't that the first suggested finding of fact? Or is that different?
It could be in the finding of fact, but we should put it in the motion. Include it in the motion so it's clear that the board is either approving or disapproving the petition, or you're amending the initial proposal to go to to council a different direction. So you could do that.
Well, when I was making the motion to amend, we already did that. We need to take the petition off the table and either send it forward as written, or say we don't recommend it, and we need to decide what we're doing with this.
Did they already vote to amend it? I may not have been here, so I apologize. I didn't know that you already amended and voted on that.
I seem to remember thinking that we tabled it and then initiated a new. Only because there are ramifications for not getting to that petition, so we got to decide how that happens.
Yeah, so the last time it was advertised as these 3 1. So this is what the public hearing was on last time. And the suggested motion last time was the same as it is today for this petition, or for this item. It was initiated by petition. Planning board made then a recommendation to add 2 parcels. So this one that you're voting on today is kind of the combination of a petition-initiated zone change followed by a planning board-initiated amendment to that zone change, both of which were advertised.
Initially, did they vote? Amend? If they voted to amend, then we're okay.
Yeah, it's not in last meeting's minutes.
It
It's
is.
been a couple months ago.
It was myself who made the motion, and I made a motion to table the item and then initiate the new process with it all in one motion. So the previous, it's been tabled, was not a motion to amend. It was a motion to table and then initiate a new process. So we're gonna have to take that other one off the table at some point and make a recommendation.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that you would have to vote on the amendment, right? And then put this one forward to council.
Yeah. We initiated this, and we tabled the petition. Tonight, we need to act on the petition.
That's what I'm getting at.
And then we should act on this because we've initiated this.
Yeah. So there's 2 separate votes. Yep.
We didn't table to a date certain, so do we need to actually address it tonight?
There was a public notice. We sent public notice on this, so we're good on that.
But to Dave's point, there was not a date certain, so does that have to be addressed today?
I will look quickly. I believe, the changes require us to give a recommendation. Citizens initiative, anyway. Or,
Oh, are you saying,
So-
do we have a time frame within which we have to respond?
Yeah, one way you could do it is you could recommend or not recommend the original petition, which was, I believe, 174-004-001, and then you can make an amendment to add the other two petitions following, or the other two parcels following that line. That's one way that I see. The floodplain line.
But if we're gonna send a favorable recommendation, including all three parcels, doesn't that, in theory, answer the petition's request?
Yeah, I think so.
I would say no formally. I would do a vote. I would have a vote on that separate piece and then have a vote on the second piece on the amendment.
it says we have to have a hearing within the unallotted time, and that we did. The planning board shall, within 30 days of the conclusion of the public hearing, so we've tabled it, so the public hearing is still going, report in writing the results of the hearing and recommendations of the board on the amendment to the city council. My assumption would be if we leave it on the table, that dies, that's the end of the hearing. But this says we have to give our...
Okay, this is what we're going to do. So we're going to move forward with this. If we have any questions around this specific item, then let's have a conversation. And then we'll have public hearing, and then we can bring it back, and then we talk about the procedure of what we have in front of us. So at this point in time, I will seek a motion to open up public comment.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Excellent. Do I have public comment? 5 minutes, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Shaw. I live at 1200 Soapers Mill Road, Valley View Farm. And I appreciate your struggling through these issues this evening. I am chair of the Natural Products and Agricultural Work Group, and I feel it would be remiss for someone not to comment on the removal of agricultural land, I'm going to say this willy-nilly, for just a 25 signature petition. I understand that we're talking about a comprehensive plan change, but it's a plan, it's not a mandate. Now, at the last meeting where you tabled this issue, I believe the petitioner said that the land had not been farmed in 30 years. I believe that's so. I spoke with a farmer today who, up until about 6 years ago, farmed that land. And he said he farmed it for the owner. It is good, arable land. They limed it, they fertilized it, they leveled it, they tended and took care of that land. And again, I just stand in opposition in principle to the removal of farmland from our natural resource protection zone. Again, I appreciate your time and effort. You guys are dealing with a lot of complicated ifs, ands, or buts. There are land use programs out there that I'm more than glad to talk with anybody about. Our city assessor is delighted to talk with folks about special land use programs to help save this land from being carved into house lots. So thank you again for your time tonight.
Excellent. Anyone else like to come forward?
I can just say one more thing as with the AG, and thank you for your
Okay,
comments.
just state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yep, I just want to add one more thing. And she mentioned that it's been 6 years, and I have cleaned it up since then, obviously, but the only reason that land is not being used for farmland now is because there's a legal battle over a right-of-way through your petitioner's land that is in the deed that gives us the right-of-way through his land to our land. So that is the biggest reason why that land is not being used for agricultural right now. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Stephanie Mar Damian. I live at 703 South Witham Road. I just kind of want to echo what Kathy said about the ag zone properties being chopped up. I think that it's sacred, it's fertile, and it'd be a shame. Once it's gone, it's gone. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward? Okay, seeing none, I take a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, excellent. So at this point in time, what we know we have in front of us, we have two things, right? We have the tabled item from December, and then this other motion to send this to City Council. So with the table item, from a procedural standpoint, what are our options?
You know, it's, my opinion is that there should be a vote on that. And then if the planning board so moves, they want to add additional lots and make a recommendation for a zone change after the completion of, after the update of the comprehensive plan, they could do that. So those seem to me to be the two cleanest procedural options.
So procedurally, take the petition off the table, vote favorably on it, but with the added parcels, and then cite the findings from today's.
Yes, we have to address both items.
I'll start. I make a motion to take from the table the item from public hearing, numbered item 3 from the December 12, 2023 Planning Board meeting, which consisted of a zoning map change initiated by a citizen petition.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Do you have discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Excellent, so motion passes. Thank you.
I make a motion to forward a recommendation to the City Council that they not amend the official zoning map of the City of Auburn entitled City of Auburn zoning map dated May 16, 2016, revised through its current date and revisions as provided under Section 60-5 of the zoning ordinance by amending City Assessor's Parcel ID 174-004-001 Oh. Can you please tell me which parcel? Because you've got them
Yes.
all listed in the last ones.
I believe you're
004001 is the petitioned parcel.
Okay, so I will stop there. From the agriculture and resource protection zoning district to the low-density rural residence or rural residential zoning district, following the interior 2% annual chance flood hazard line for total zone change. I'm going to leave that out. The interior 0.2% annual chance flood hazard, with the finding that rezoning a single parcel creates discontinuity in land use in the area and is inconsistent with future land use plan.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion?
That was to not pass.
For the one parcel, yep.
Mhm. Yep. Any discussion? All those in favor? Excellent, motion carries. All right, so we are after 9 o'clock, and at this point in time, we call for a motion to continue agenda items. And this has to be unanimous, right? So all of us have to agree to continue to either continue with the agenda items, continue with agenda certain items, or continue to a certain time. So I will seek a motion.
I'll seek a motion to continue.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
I'm sorry, what was the motion?
To continue.
With all the agenda items?
Yes.
All right, so do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, motion does not carry.
We still have to finish the item we're doing though.
Which is?
The public hearing about,
Right.
we started this, right?
We're still
Yeah.
on 6.
I think
Oh,
we
sorry.
still need a recommendation on the map that, like the other two parcels, like the total of the 3.
All right.
I make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to City Council to amend the official zoning map of the City of Auburn entitled City of Auburn zoning map dated May 16, 2016, revised to its current date and revisions as provided under Section 60-5 of the zoning ordinance by amending City Assessor's parcel ID 174-00401, 174-00402, and 174-004 from Agriculture and Resource Protection Zoning District to the Low-Density Rural Residence or Rural Residence Zoning District following the interior 2% annual chance flood hazard line for a total zone change of 18.2 plus or minus acres based on the findings of fact that the applicant, the proposal can be implemented without detriment to city resources, and the proposal meets the general future land use plan pattern of development in the area and is consistent with the revised comprehensive plan.
Do you have a second?
Just to clarify, you said favorable?
Wait, do I have a second? Then we can, do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions?
You said favorable?
Yep.
Any discussions, questions? All right, all those in favor? Okay, motion. All those in favor?
We don't know how you voted, so it looks like a tie.
It looks like a tie. What happens when there's a tie?
It fails.
Yeah, but you could vote as well, Stacy.
I know.
Are you voting, if you're voting in the negative?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I make a motion to forward a recommendation to City Council not to amend the official zoning map of the City of Auburn entitled City of Auburn zoning map dated May 16, 2016, revised to its current date and revisions as provided under Section 60-5 of the zoning ordinance by amending City Assessor's parcel ID 174-004-001, 174-004-002, and 174-004 from the Agriculture and Resource Protection Zoning District to the Low-Density Rural Residential or Rural Residence Zoning District following the interior 0.2% annual chance flood hazard line.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do you have any discussion?
So basically what we're doing here, since we've already denied the applicant, is denying them again, right? So basically we're saying to the applicant that they're not able to make this change.
This one was about whether or not we felt it was more harmonious to do it as the entire section instead of just the one lot.
Yeah, but since we already declined the first one, now,
We're not declining them again. They didn't initiate the second one. We did.
right, but he has no way forward if that's the change that they want to make at this point, because we've already declined the individual spot.
It's still up to city council, because we're just giving an unfavorable.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? All those opposed?
I abstain upon grounds that there were no findings of fact.
All right, there you go. So motion carries. All right, there we go. Any other items before I move on to, are we done with this? Okay, all right. So at this point in time, I need a motion, because it's after 9 o'clock, to continue again. So we continue to a time, we continue with certain agenda items, or we continue with all the agenda items.
Well, I think we already made the motion. I think you were right in making that motion then. We just had to finish that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
as the presiding officer, if you wanted to fall back to that, I think you would be well
Then
within
the
your...
motion carries, and we adjourn.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.